Hey, YouTube theologians, I got a cool question from David here, who asks, in response to the grab bag video, we're going to call that boxology, by the way. What a cool name for a video series, boxology. That's this awesome. I'm going to send a book to, I got to go see whoever thought of that name, and I'll send you a free book. If that was you, send me a note. In fact, I should send also to David a free book. Okay, here's a new rule. Whoever asks a question or leave a comment that gets a video responded to, then you get a free book, free theology book. So David, send me a note and I'll send you the link to order that free book. That'll be awesome. Okay, so David asks, why did Abel offer, let me put the card up here. Did Abel sacrifice the lamb because there was a promise attached, Lutheran theology, or because God told him to, evangelical theology? Is there a difference? That's a good question, David. I don't know that we can be so clear that there is a difference between the Lutheran view of this and the evangelical view of this. I just don't know that there's a sort of settled exegetical tradition. But how we look at Cain and Abel and the sacrifice that Abel makes is very informative. Now, so to remember the story, first, Adam and Eve are created, they fall, they're removed from the garden. Significant thing there. Two significant things. Number one is that Adam was given the vocation of gardener. He was also zoologist. So Adam had dominion over all of creation, but he was especially to tend the garden. We'll remember also that before the Lord removed Adam and Eve from the garden, he took an animal and clothed them in skin. So then they have their two children. Cain is the oldest. Eve thinks that Cain is the Messiah. I have received a child who is the Lord, she says. It turns out not to be the case. Cain is the oldest. Cain then has the family business, farming. Abel is the next boy, and he is out in the fields as the shepherd. And it's curious to think that, so there's differences between shepherding and farming. The farming is settled. It seems like that's a city thing. We see especially that in the curse that Cain has to wander. So Cain had sort of a settled life. Abel had more of a wandering kind of life. And it's also important to remember that they wouldn't have eaten any of the animals that Abel was raising. So why was Abel even concerned with the flocks? For clothing, probably, and for sacrifice. Remember that first I think this is a key thing. Remember that first sacrifice that God makes in the garden. They had their fig leaves, and the leaves are not enough. There's blood and death involved in covering of shame and sin. And so when the Lord sacrifices the animal, it's something of an institution. And so now, even though Cain was the oldest and had the best job, and his job was also clean, farming is not clean, but it's cleaner than ranching. He doesn't have the death of the animals and all this sort of stuff. Cain would have smelled better than Abel, etc. He would have been it's the family business. Okay, so now they come to offer the sacrifice. And Cain brings of his own works, and Abel brings of his own works, but from the flock. And the Lord accepts Abel's offering, but not Cain's. Now, there's not much that indicates why in the text in Genesis, but Hebrews helps us out. So if you look at Hebrews 11, this beautiful chapter in Hebrews 11, it says that, it's right there at the beginning. I think it's like verse 3 or something. It says, by faith, it's listing all the things by faith. It talks about creation. And it says, by faith, Abel offered a more acceptable sacrifice God bearing witness to this, that he was righteous. And even though he's dead, he still speaks. In another place, where is that? It says that the blood of Jesus testifies of better things than the blood of Abel. But the blood of Abel still speaks, it says in Hebrews. That's my memory of the passage, so you'll want to go and look it up and make sure I'm getting it right. But so here's the first thing, that the reason why Abel's sacrifice was more acceptable was because of faith. Now here we get to the difference between the Lutherans and the evangelicals when it comes to thinking about faith. Because there's two, when it comes to faith, we want to think of two things. Number one, and chiefly and of most importance, is the promise. That's what the old theologians called the faith that is believed. That's what Jude says, the faith once for all delivered to the saints. The faith means that the Lord has spoken a promise, and then the second is our believing that promise. The faith that believes, the faith that clings to the promise. And here's the main thing, and this is not a Lutheran evangelical sort of thing, this is just a Bible thing, it's just often missed, is that faith is only as good as its object. Faith is, you can't, people talk about this all the time, like I'm a man of faith. Well, in what? In faith that it's going to rain tonight? In faith that you're going to be able to stand on one foot for over 3 hours if called upon? What is your faith in? A man of faith. We all are people of faith. Everybody has faith. It's what the heart does. It loves and fears and hopes and trusts. But what is your trust in? Remember the picture of the two guys going across the ice. One with very weak faith who shimmies across, the other with very great faith, and he drives a snowmobile across. They both get across, not because of their faith, but because of the thickness of the ice. So that faith is always connected to the object. So when it says that Abel's sacrifice was acceptable because of faith, we have to say, well, what was his faith in? Now, it could be a general faith in the Lord, like Abel trusted in God and Cain trusted in himself. It seems like that was Cain's trust. He was proud of his own vocation and his own works, and he was offering to God his own. He would never have wanted to go and obtained a lamb from his brother to offer that. That's stinky and nasty, and this is something even better. He has his own invented sacrifice, while Abel's sacrifice seems to have carried on from what the Lord himself had put in place in the garden. So that Abel's faith, now this is a half step beyond what the scriptures tell us. So if you want to disagree with me here, it's great, but I don't think we're moving too far away from what the Bible's talking about. Abel's faith is in the promise that the sacrifice of blood cleanses sin. He's going back to that sacrifice instituted in the garden. That's the promise. So that Abel's faith is in the coming death of the Messiah. Remember that every sacrifice in the Old Testament is a preaching sacrifice that's preaching the death of the one whose blood would forgive sin. The blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin. And they knew that. I mean, how could the death of a lamb that didn't do anything wrong atone for me, a human being who did all sorts of things wrong? So it's preaching the death of one who's greater than me, whose death will take away my sin. That's how it is in the Old Testament. And Abel has faith then in Jesus. And so his sacrifice is acceptable. Now there's so much to learn from this. I mean, so many things to reflect on. But I don't want to miss this. That faith God accepts as righteousness. So that's how it says it. Just a few chapters later with Abraham. Abraham believed the Lord and he reckoned his faith as righteousness. And so what happens is that if you could think of it like this, that the greatest honor that we can give the Lord is by believing what he says. So that the Lord gives a promise to Abraham and Abraham believes him, and then God sees that faith of Abraham, and all the other things that Abraham has done wrong they just kind of fade away. We don't want to make a too human picture out of it, but can you imagine, here's someone and they've done a bunch of things wrong by you, but then they come and they say something of you, or they consider you a certain way, like maybe the kids, take this picture, the kids, they didn't clean their room, and they didn't help with the dishes, and they didn't match the socks up, and they didn't do their homework, all these things that you told them to do and they didn't do, but then they come and they say with sincerity, this is not putting on a front, they come and they say, I'm so happy that you're my dad. I love you. Or they come and they say, all the kids today were talking about, whose mom is the sweetest, but there could never be a mom sweeter than you, they say to the moms. And all the other stuff sort of, that's all in the background now. You love the kid. It's something like that. When we say to the Lord, those words of yours, those are true, and I'm going to stake my life on it. That faith is reckoned as righteous. That's the worship of faith. This is how faith worships God, because it trusts him in life and in death. We throw our lot in with the Lord. So that Abel looks around and he sees Cain and this beautiful wave offering, must smell great, offering the grain and everything. But here's the word of the Lord, the life is in the blood. And so he goes and he offers this sacrifice. And the Lord smiles. Now, as soon as this happens, by the way, there's a great spiritual danger that's really about to flare up in Cain. Was I getting the name wrong just then? So Abel offers the sacrifice that God accepts. And the spiritual danger is now going to come for Cain. The Lord comes and warns him, sin's lurking at the door to devour you. Because if we're puffed up and think that the thing that we're going to offer to the Lord is our own works, and then that's slapped down, now the real spiritual danger comes. Am I going to defend myself? Am I going to continue on in my self-justifying ways? Or am I going to go to Abel and ask for a goat or whatever from him to make the sacrifice? But Abel gets twisted up. Lord, if you want blood, I'll give you blood. And he gives him the blood of Abel, which cries out for vengeance, not mercy. So that's what I think's going on with Cain and Abel. David, great question. Thanks so much for asking it. Send me a note, wolfmueller.co/contact, that you wrote that question, and I'll send you the link for a free book. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the rest of you YouTube theologians. So comment below